Rocco Santoro did not touch the dirty white rag until Tessa Rowan threw it across table 7 and told him he could not sit in her diner until his own hand cleaned the mess. The rag landed beside his black leather glove with a wet slap. Coffee dripped from the edge of the table. Maple syrup crept toward the red vinyl seat. A cracked egg yolk slid in slow yellow shame across the laminated breakfast menu. A silver napkin holder rocked once, then settled, reflecting the whole diner in a warped little flash. 26 customers, 2 black-suited bodyguards, 1 stunned busboy, and Tessa standing with a coffee pot in one hand and a stack of order slips in the other. Rocco looked at the rag. Then he looked at her. Rocco looked at the rag. Then he looked at her. He was 42, clean-shaven, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a black 3-piece suit beneath a long black overcoat, the kind of coat that made even a greasy spoon diner seem like it had accidentally admitted weather from a private funeral. His hair was dark, his jaw sharp, his signet ring heavy, and his stillness so complete that every person in Roseclock Diner had gone silent before deciding whether silence was required. Tessa did not give him time to decide. "You heard me," she said. "If your table made the mess, your hand holds the rag." One of his bodyguards shifted forward. Tessa lifted the coffee pot without looking at him. "Don't," she said. "Hot coffee travels faster than bad judgment." The bodyguard stopped. Rocco's eyes moved from the coffee pot to the rag, then to the mess that had spread across table 7 because his men had tried to clear the corner booth before the breakfast rush had finished. They had not meant to make a spectacle. That was what people would say later, because powerful men were often gifted accidental innocence by rooms too nervous to name carelessness. But the facts were simple. Rocco Santoro had entered at 8:06 with 2 guards ahead of him and 1 behind. His driver had parked a black SUV outside the diner's front window, half in the bus stop and half in a puddle that splashed customers' ankles when traffic passed. His right-hand man had scanned the booths, decided the corner one belonged to Rocco by natural law, and moved the tray from table 7 without asking the man still eating there. The tray had hit the coffee cup. The coffee had hit the syrup. The syrup had taken the eggs with it. The man at table 7, a city sanitation worker named Dean, had stood up so fast his knee struck the underside of the table. His uniform sleeve was wet. His toast was on the floor. He was already apologizing, even though none of it was his fault. That was the part that made Tessa throw the rag, not the mess. Mess was part of diner work. Coffee spilled. Children dropped fries. Truckers tracked rain. Teenagers poured too much sugar into everything and called it science. But Dean apologizing to the men who had ruined his breakfast made something in Tessa's chest click into a place that had teeth. She had worked the morning shift at Roseclock for 9 years. She could balance 6 plates on one arm, catch a wrong allergy order before the kitchen bell rang, restart the register with a bent receipt key and prayer, and tell by the sound of a chair scrape whether a customer was leaving angry or just stiff from night work. She knew who paid in quarters, who pretended not to need the free coffee refill, who had bad knees, who had a daughter in rehab, who needed the booth near the heat because the winter draft punished old bones. She also knew the difference between accident and entitlement. So she had reached into the sanitizer bucket, pulled out the dirty white rag, wrung it once, and thrown it across table 7. Now Rocco Santoro stood there with his table, his men, his ruined breakfast, and every eye in the diner waiting. He took a folded $100 bill from his coat pocket and placed it on the dry edge of the table. "For the trouble," he said. Tessa looked at the bill. "That's paper." His brows barely moved. "It is money. Money comes after clean. Your busboy can clean it. My busboy didn't make it." The busboy, Aaron, froze beside the pie case with a tub of silverware clutched to his chest. Rocco's gaze moved to him. Aaron looked away too fast. Tessa stepped into that line of sight. "Look at me," she said, "not him." The whole diner went even quieter. Rocco looked at her. Tessa was 29, 5'6" if the floor mats were generous, with dark blonde hair twisted into a knot, black diner sneakers, and a pale blue uniform dress under a flour-dusted apron. There was nothing delicate about the way she stood. Warmth lived in her hands when she poured coffee for old men who had forgotten how to ask for company, but steel lived in her spine when someone tried to make a service worker invisible. "Table 7 stays closed until you wipe it," she said. "I can buy the table. You still can't sit at it dirty." Someone in the back booth made a small sound and swallowed it. Rocco heard. Of course he heard. Men like him survived by hearing the room beneath the room. His right-hand man leaned close. "Boss, we can use another table." "No," Tessa said. The man looked at her as if the word had come from the ceiling. "If he sits somewhere else," she continued, "my floor learns that your mess moves to other people. We are not teaching that before 9 in the morning." Rocco's eyes stayed on her face. "And if I leave, then table 7 stays dirty until the whole breakfast rush has seen what kind of man walks away from eggs he spilled and people he made apologize." That landed. Not loudly. Rocco did not flinch, but his gloved fingers stopped moving against the $100 bill. Dean, the sanitation worker, cleared his throat. "Miss Tessa, it's fine." "No," she said without looking away from Rocco. "It is not." Dean's face shifted. Relief was sometimes more painful to watch than shame. Rocco looked at him then. Not over him. At him. The sanitation worker's sleeve was wet with coffee. His breakfast was ruined. His apology was still sitting in the air like a debt nobody had accepted. Rocco looked back at Tessa. "What exactly do you want?" "Pick up the rag." His right-hand man whispered, "Rocco." Rocco lifted one hand. The man stopped. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Rocco Santoro, who owned freight routes, private clubs, 2 cold storage warehouses, and more judges' secrets than he needed, picked up the dirty white rag between his black-gloved fingers. The diner breathed incorrectly. Tessa did not smile. "Start with the syrup," she said. Rocco looked at the table. "Why?" "Because if you push coffee through syrup, it spreads. Work from the sticky edge in. Fold the rag. Don't smear it like you're signing a treaty with butter." A laugh broke from the grill cook, then died behind the kitchen pass. Rocco looked toward the sound. Tessa snapped her fingers once. "Table," she said. His eyes returned to hers. She pointed with the order slips. "You asked what I wanted. I am answering." He folded the rag. Badly. "Other side," she said. He turned it. "Press. Don't drag." He pressed. The syrup lifted in a dull amber streak. It was a ridiculous sight, a mafia boss with a ring worth more than the diner's winter heating bill, cleaning breakfast mess under fluorescent lights while a waitress corrected his wrist angle. It was also the first honest thing the room had seen from him. Rocco wiped the edge of the table. Coffee soaked into the rag. He reached for the napkin holder. "Leave that," Tessa said. "Metal gets washed separate." He stopped. She handed Dean a clean towel from her apron pocket. "Sleeve first. Coffee cools, but it stains." Dean took it carefully. "Thank you." "Aaron," she called, "new eggs for table 7. On my comp." Rocco looked up. "On mine. Not yet. You refuse money. I refuse money used as a broom." He absorbed that. "What comes first?" Tessa tapped the dirty rag in his hand. "Clean." He looked at the table, then at the rag, then at her. "And after clean, you apologize to Dean." His mouth went still. There it was. Tessa knew that stillness. She had seen versions of it in men who would tip 50% to avoid saying please, men who called her sweetheart when they meant servant, men who slammed plates and then claimed they were under stress, men who thought a bill could become an apology if it was large enough. Rocco was worse because he was more controlled. He had probably paid for silence, injuries, doors, reputations, funerals, weddings, college tuition, and every kind of damage men like him caused on their way through the world. He had probably arranged repair before anyone knew what broke. But the word itself sat in him like a locked drawer. Tessa could see it. She did not open it for him. "Finish the table first," she said. He did, slowly. Not well, but honestly enough that Tessa did not stop him. He wiped the syrup, then the coffee, then the egg. She replaced the rag once because it had gone cold and greasy. He accepted the clean, dirty one without comment. His bodyguard stood by the pie case, looking as if the entire social order had lost a wheel. When the table was clean enough for Tessa to approve, she set a bus tub on the chair. Menu in the tub. Cup in the tub. plate pieces in the tub. "You are enjoying this," Rocco said. "A little." His eyes sharpened. "But mostly," she said, "I am making sure Aaron doesn't have to put his hands in your mistake while you watch." Aaron's throat moved. Rocco followed her glance. Something changed in his face then. Not softness. Recognition. He placed the cup, the menu, and the broken plate into the tub. Then he turned to Dean. The sanitation worker straightened as if he was about to be disciplined for existing in the wrong booth. Rocco removed his right glove. The diner saw his bare hand before it heard his voice. "I am sorry my men ruined your breakfast," he said. "And I am sorry I tried to pay before I cleaned what we made." Dean blinked. "It's all right." "It is not," Rocco said. Tessa looked down at the order slips before her face could show too much. Dean nodded once. "Then thank you." Rocco turned back to her. "May I sit now?" The question was quiet enough that only the nearest booths heard it, but it passed through the diner anyway. Tessa inspected the table. The edge still needed a sanitizer pass, but the mess was gone. The insult had been named. The apology had landed where it belonged. "After Aaron resets it," she said. Rocco looked at the booth. "I wait, you wait." He folded the rag once and set it beside the bus tub. "Then I wait." That should have ended the morning's strangest moment. It did not, because men like Rocco Santoro did not arrive at a diner by accident, and the envelope his right-hand man kept touching inside his coat was not a breakfast menu. At 8:31, Roseclock Diner resumed making noise. Forks moved, the grill hissed, the coffee machine spat steam. Customers stared down into mugs, pretending not to have witnessed a man with a citywide reputation lose a quiet argument to a waitress with a dirty rag. Tessa moved because the room needed her moving. 2 over hard, wheat dry, booth 3, refill 5. Aaron, table 7, reset after sanitizer. "Miguel, kill the onions on the trucker plate," he asked twice. She poured coffee for Dean, replaced his eggs, and set the $100 bill back in front of Rocco, where he stood waiting near the pie case. "You forgot this." "I left it." "Then pick it up." "It was for the trouble." "The trouble was cleaned. The breakfast is comped. If Dean wants to accept an apology breakfast, he can, but I don't let men tip the room into pretending nothing happened." Rocco took the bill. His bare hand closed around it. He had not put his glove back on. Tessa noticed, because she noticed everything that might become a problem, or that was what she told herself. His right-hand man stepped forward again, lower voice this time. "The meeting." Rocco looked at the corner booth, now being wiped by Aaron with professional speed and visible nerves. 5 minutes. "Sable is upstairs." Tessa's hand stopped over the coffee pot. Rocco saw. "You know Paul Sable?" he said. Every regular within earshot found a reason to listen. Tessa poured coffee without spilling. "I know men who use first names like toll booths. That is not an answer. Paul Sable is the landlord's new representative. He thinks Roseclock would be more profitable if breakfast ended at 10 and the back room became a private supper club for people who don't know how to stack plates." Rocco's expression did not change, but the room around him seemed to tighten. "He works for me," he said. "Then you should give him a rag." Someone coughed into a napkin. Rocco looked at the ceiling. The diner's upstairs office had once been storage, then a bookkeeping room, then the place where dying fluorescent tubes went to hum above unpaid invoices. If Paul Sable was up there, he had not come through the front door. That irritated Tessa more than it should have. Front doors mattered. They made people visible. He said the morning rush was not relevant to the property value, Tessa said. Rocco looked at her. "When?" "Last Thursday." "To whom?" "Me, Aaron, Miguel, and Mrs. Pike, who comes in every morning at 6:30 because the diner is the only place between here and the dialysis shuttle that opens before 7. Rocco's jaw shifted. "Dialysis shuttle?" he asked. Tessa set the coffee pot down slowly. "Do not say that word like you just found a loose screw in your machine. I asked a question. Then ask it like people write it." His eyes held hers. For a second, the diner vanished into the space between them. Not romantic, Not yet. More dangerous than that. Recognition again, blade against blade. What does Roseclock do before 7? He asked, quieter. Tessa did not soften. She answered because the answer mattered. Coffee for the sanitation crew, toast for Mrs. Pike before the shuttle, egg sandwiches for the bus drivers, a warm booth for the overnight nurses who cannot face their apartments yet, change for the laundromat, phone charging when the bus shelter outlet dies, a bathroom that does not ask if you bought enough to deserve being human. Rocco listened. Many men looked like they listened while waiting for a chance to speak. Rocco listened as if every word filed itself somewhere expensive. And Sable wants the back room, he said. Sable wants the back room first, then the morning hours. Then the counter gone because stools look cheap in renderings. Then Roseclock becomes one of those places with black menus and tiny plates named after weather. Miguel called from the grill, I refuse to cook fog. The diner laughed because it needed to. Rocco's mouth almost moved. Tessa saw it and regretted noticing. The upstairs door opened. Paul Sable descended the narrow staircase in a gray suit too smooth for a building that smelled like bacon grease and lemon cleaner. He had silver hair, sharp glasses, and a tablet under one arm. Behind him came the landlord, Warren Pike, nephew to Mrs. Pike and heir to none of her decency. Mr. Santoro, Sable said, smiling. You're early. Tessa folded her arms. He's late. Breakfast started at 6. Sable's smile flattened by 1 degree. Miss Rowan. Still here. Temporarily, Warren Pike muttered. Rocco looked at him. Warren decided to become interested in the floor. Sable's eyes moved over table 7, the rag, the bus tub, the customers who had resumed eating too slowly. He understood something had happened, but not what it cost. Men like Sable often saw aftermath without learning cause. We can meet upstairs, Sable said. Less noise. No, Rocco said. Sable blinked. No, we meet here. This is hardly appropriate. Tessa lifted the dirty white rag from beside the tub and dropped it into the sanitizer bucket. Best news I've heard all morning. Rocco looked at table 7. Sit, Tessa told him. Sable's eyebrows lifted. Rocco sat. Not in the corner booth Sable wanted cleared. At table 7, where Aaron had just set a clean place and where the faint smell of sanitizer still proved the morning had happened. Sable remained standing. Is there a reason we are not using the office? I want to understand the asset, Rocco said. Tessa hated the word asset on principle. The asset, she said, has a 2-egg special cooling in the pass because you people keep making speeches in front of hash browns. Rocco looked at her. May I order? The question again. Every time he asked instead of assumed, the diner shifted half an inch around him. You may, Tessa said. What can I get you? He looked at the menu, then at Dean's replaced plate. What was ruined? 2 eggs over medium, rye toast, potatoes, coffee. That. Eggs over medium take patience. I have been practicing. Tessa wrote it down before her face could betray anything. Coffee? Please. The word please did not sound comfortable in his mouth. That made it better. Sable set his tablet on the table. Mr. Santoro, the diner is sentimental clutter in a corridor with significant evening potential. Our proposal preserves the exterior sign for local texture while converting the interior into a reservation-only supper concept. No, Tessa said. Sable did not look at her. The existing staff may apply. Miguel leaned through the pass. Apply to cook fog? Miguel, Tessa warned, because she was the only one allowed to be reckless on purpose. Rocco stirred nothing into his coffee. What happens to morning service? Sable smiled as if the question had been anticipated and neutralized. Low-margin hours are eliminated. And Mrs. Pike's shuttle breakfast? Rocco asked. Warren Pike went pale. Sable glanced at Warren. Community usage can be redirected. Tessa set Rocco's coffee down harder than necessary. People are not plumbing. Sable finally looked at her. Miss Rowan, your emotional attachment is understandable. My attachment is payroll, inventory, opening procedures, health records, supplier schedules, and knowing which regular needs the seat closest to the bathroom because his hip locks in the cold. If you want emotion, wait until I start swearing. The grill cook whispered, she's saving that for dessert. Rocco's eyes lowered to his coffee for 1 second. Tessa thought, absurdly, that he was hiding a smile. Sable's voice chilled. The health records are precisely part of our concern. Tessa went still. Rocco noticed. Explain, he said. Sable opened a folder. There have been complaints. Grease accumulation, improper sanitation, staff misconduct. An incident this morning, apparently, involving a customer being required to perform cleaning work. The diner went quiet in a new way. Aaron looked at the floor. Dean put his fork down. Tessa felt the dirty rag in the sanitizer bucket as if it were still in her hand. You filed that already? She said. Sable's expression was smooth. We monitor risk. You monitor opportunities to call labor dirty. That is not what I said. It's what you meant. Rocco looked at the folder, then at table 7, then at Tessa. Show me the complaints. Sable slid the folder toward him. Tessa reached for it. Sable placed one hand on top. These are ownership documents. Tessa smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Then ownership can explain how the grease complaint got filed on Tuesday when the hood inspection was Wednesday and passed at 9:14 with your representative in the room. Sable's hand stopped. Rocco looked at Tessa. You have that report? Of course I have that report. I have every report. I have delivery logs, cleaning sheets, temperature charts, comp records, register tapes, and the email where Warren asked me not to mention the supper club to his aunt until papers were signed. Warren made a noise. Mrs. Pike, at booth 2, lowered her toast. Warren, she said. Warren looked as if a much higher power than Rocco Santoro had just entered judgment. Tessa went behind the counter, unlocked the lower drawer, and lifted out a binder thick enough to stop a brick. She set it on table 7. The sound it made was deeply satisfying. Roseclock Diner, she said, cleaning and service records, 6 months. Sable gave a small laugh. A binder does not change market realities. No, Tessa said. It changes lies into paperwork. Rocco opened the binder. He had spent his life reading contracts that hid knives behind commas. Tessa's binder was different. It hid nothing. It was fierce with proof, initials, times, photographs, invoices, notes in 3 colors, emergency repairs circled, supplier substitutions explained, customer comp reasons logged without humiliating anyone. At 8:52, his eggs arrived. Tessa set him down beside the binder. Eat before they're rubber, she said. Sable looked offended that breakfast continued. Rocco picked up his fork. The diner watched him take 1 bite. He chewed, swallowed. This is good, Miguel shouted, obviously. Tessa poured coffee into Rocco's cup. Compliments go through the tip jar, not the acquisition strategy. He looked up at her. Noted. After 10, when the rush finally thinned and table 7 still held the binder, Sable's false complaints, Warren's sweat, and Rocco Santoro's half-finished coffee. Tessa had been on her feet since 4:30. Her shoulders burned. Her hair was escaping its knot. Syrup had found the one place on her sleeve she had not protected. She was still moving because stopping felt like giving men permission to call her tiredness weakness. Rocco saw it. She hated that he saw it. Sit for 3 minutes, he said. She gave him a look that would have curdled milk. Did you just order me to sit in my own diner? He held up both hands, one bare, one still gloved. No, I said that wrong. Try again. Sable looked from one to the other, bewildered by the idea of Rocco Santoro revising his own sentence because a waitress told him to. Rocco pushed the dirty white rag, now rinsed and wrung, toward the center of the table. I know how to make a problem disappear, he said quietly. I do not know how to clean what I caused. Teach me the rule. The diner did not hear every word. Tessa did. The line found the place behind her ribs that anger usually guarded. She looked at the rag, then at his face. There was no performance in it now, no room play, no expensive humility being worn for effect, just a dangerous man admitting, in the plainest possible terms, that he had mistaken removal for repair. Tessa swallowed. First rule, she said, you don't clean to look forgiven. You clean so the next person can sit without inheriting your mess. Rocco nodded once. Second rule, use fresh water when the rag is dirty. Otherwise, you are just spreading old damage with confidence. Something in his eyes shifted. That one sounds portable, he said. Most diner rules are. She took the rag, dipped it in the sanitizer bucket, wrung it, and handed it back to him. This time, he did not take it by the corner like evidence. He took it like a tool. Tessa pointed to the floor near the booth where coffee had dried in a small brown crescent. There. You missed that. Rocco crouched. His bodyguards looked physically pained. He wiped the floor, not kneeling, not bowing, not becoming less dangerous. If anything, the danger in him became clearer because he chose not to spend it. He placed one hand on the table edge, bent low enough to see what remained, and cleaned the part everyone else had stepped around. Tessa crouched beside him with a second rag and showed him how to fold it clean side out. If you see the edge, you start there, she said. Not the center. Why? The edge is where people slip. He looked at the brown crescent. Yes, he said. She did not know whether he meant syrup. They worked in silence for half a minute while Sable, Warren, Aaron, Dean, Miguel, and half the diner tried to pretend they were not watching the most feared man in the city learn the geometry of wiping a diner floor. When it was clean, Tessa stood. Rocco stood too. He was close enough that she could smell rain in his coat and coffee on his breath. Third rule? He asked. You don't leave the rag on the table for someone else. He looked at the sanitizer bucket. Where does it go? Rinse bin, then laundry. He put it there. The act was small. It changed the whole room. Sable cleared his throat. This is touching, but the ownership question remains. Rocco turned. The softness, if that was what it had been, left his face without taking the lesson with it. Yes, he said. It does. He sat at table 7 again and opened the binder. For the next hour, Roseclock Diner became a courtroom with pancakes. Tessa worked the floor while Rocco read. He asked questions without demanding she stop serving to answer them. When she passed, she answered. When she was busy, he waited. This seemed to disturb Sable more than threats would have. Who signed the hood inspection? Rocco asked. City Inspector Halden, page blue tab. Why 2 produce suppliers? One handles early delivery, one takes small orders without punishing us for not being a hotel. This staff misconduct complaint. Aaron was accused of blocking access to the back hallway. He was carrying Mrs. Pike's walker because Warren told her storage was being inspected and scared her into moving faster than her hip could manage. Mrs. Pike's fork clicked down. Warren Pike, she said. Warren whispered, Aunt Louise. Do not Aunt Louise me while I am holding toast. Miguel leaned through the pass. Toast is powerful. Rocco read the complaint again. You filed this? He asked Warren. Warren looked at Sable. Sable looked at the window. Rocco closed the folder. Both of you sit. Sable stiffened. Mr. Santoro, sit. They sat. Tessa did not like the satisfaction that moved through the diner. Satisfaction could become spectacle. Spectacle could become cruelty. She had not thrown the rag to create a new bully. Rocco seemed to understand because he did not raise his voice. You used my acquisition letter to pressure this diner into default, he said. Sable's smile attempted resurrection. We created leverage for transition. You filed false sanitation concerns. We documented vulnerabilities. You scared an elderly woman about storage access. Warren said, that was not, Mrs. Pike said, finish that sentence and I revise my will in ketchup. Warren stopped. Rocco looked at Tessa. Did you ask me for help? No. Why? Because men who own the problem usually want to own the gratitude too. The sentence hit him. Good, she thought. But his answer came steadier than she expected. Then this will be repaired without touching your gratitude. Sable's eyes sharpened. We still need a private dining solution. Rocco looked around the diner, Dean in his clean sleeve, Aaron wiping menus, Miguel at the pass, Mrs. Pike with toast and righteous fury, the bus driver at the counter, the nurse's aide asleep for 3 precious minutes over coffee. No, he said, we need breakfast. Tessa looked away. It was annoying. How much that helped. Rocco's phone appeared in his hand. He called someone named Vito and spoke plainly. Freeze all Sable proposals tied to Roseclock. Send legal to audit complaints, supplier interruptions, lease pressure, and any communication involving Warren Pike. No one contacts Miss Rowan without her consent. No one uses my name here unless they are prepared to say it in front of her. He listened. Because I said, the table gets cleaned before anyone sits. He ended the call. Tessa stared despite herself. He met her eyes. Portable, he said. She almost smiled. Careful. Diner rules get bossy when encouraged. I noticed. At noon, Sable left without the back room, without the complaints, and without the smooth dignity he had arrived wearing. Warren followed after receiving 3 separate instructions from his aunt, none of which Tessa would have been brave enough to print. Rocco remained. Not because anyone asked him to. The main conflict was over. Aaron needed the soda line reset. Miguel needed someone to sign for an emergency produce delivery because Warren had delayed the morning order. Mrs. Pike needed help reaching the curb when the shuttle came. Dean's replacement breakfast needed boxing because his supervisor called. Tessa moved through all of it with speed, warmth, and a kind of exact mercy that made no speeches about itself. Rocco watched until she snapped, "If you are going to stand there observing like a museum guard, hold this." She shoved a stack of clean menus into his hands. His bodyguard made a strangled sound. Rocco held the menus. Where do they go? Dry side of the counter, alphabetical by section, because Aaron likes order and I like Aaron calm. Aaron looked up, startled by being seen kindly in the middle of chaos. Rocco placed the menus where she pointed. The world did not end. At 1:18, the lunch rush thinned. Tessa leaned both hands on the counter and took one deep breath. Rocco set a glass of water beside her. She looked at it. Is this a gift? No, it is water. From a man who nearly converted my diner into fog plates. Then consider it evidence of partial rehabilitation. Partial is doing heavy lifting, as did you. She hated that her throat tightened. Don't make me soft before the pie delivery, she said. I would not dare. The pie delivery arrived late, of course, because days like that enjoyed structure. The driver brought 4 apple, 2 cherry, 1 coconut cream, and a rumor that Sable had been shouting in the alley before leaving. Tessa signed the invoice, checked the boxes, and found the coconut cream smashed on one side. Discount? The driver asked hopefully. Replacement, Tessa said. Kitchen says tomorrow. Kitchen can receive my detailed emotional response today. Rocco watched her negotiate a free replacement and delivery credit with the same focused patience she had used to make him wipe syrup. You enjoy fighting, he said when she hung up. I enjoy accurate outcomes. That is not the same. It is if people keep being wrong at me. He laughed. It was not loud. It was not soft either. It startled both of them enough that Miguel stuck his head through the pass. Did the dark suit just laugh? No, Tessa said. Rocco looked at her. No? Health code violation. Didn't happen. Miguel nodded solemnly. Understood. By 3, Mrs. Pike had returned with the original lease in a tote bag and the expression of a woman prepared to end a bloodline over soup. The lease was worse than Tessa knew, but not worse than she had feared. Sable had built the trap around 3 false complaints. Warren had signed notices without telling his aunt. The supper club proposal would keep the Roseclock sign and remove everything Roseclock actually did. Mrs. Pike read the clause twice. Warren is an idiot, she said. An ambitious idiot, Tessa said. Worse. Rocco turned a page. This can be reversed. Tessa's guard rose. For how long? Men like Sable grow back. Men like Warren sign new papers. Men like you wake up next month and decide breakfast is less interesting than a private room with richer customers. I do not need a dramatic rescue. I need terms that stay true after everyone stops watching. Mrs. Pike nodded. I like her. Everyone does, Miguel called from the kitchen. No one asked the kitchen, Tessa called back. Rocco folded his hands on the table. What terms? She was ready. Of course she was ready. She pulled a worn sheet from her apron pocket. Morning service protected from 5:30 to 11. Counter seating stays. Back room remains community overflow unless I approve private use. Staff retained. No complaint counts toward default unless verified by an outside inspector and shared with me within 48 hours. Supplier changes require my written approval. Mrs. Pike gets the corner booth heat fixed before winter. Mrs. Pike blinked. You wrote me into the lease? Your hip wrote you into the lease. Rocco took the paper. You carried this? For 6 weeks. Why didn't you send it? She looked at the dirty rag hanging over the rinse bin, because I knew men upstairs would call it emotional. Rocco read the list again. It is operationally precise. Careful, Santoro. Compliments can sound like surprise if you aim them wrong. I am not surprised you are precise, he said. I am surprised anyone thought you were not. That one landed too close. Tessa turned away under the pretense of checking the pie case. Rocco did not follow. He stayed where he was, which was becoming one of the more irritatingly decent things about him. His attorney arrived at 4, expecting a private room, and finding table 7, 2 mugs of coffee, Mrs. Pike with toast, and Tessa's red pen already uncapped. The next 90 minutes were paper, corrections, and interruptions from the dinner prep. Tessa refused any clause that made Roseclock dependent on Rocco's mood. Rocco backed her refusals, and when the attorney used language that sounded like rich fog, Tessa crossed it out and wrote what it meant. At 5:36, the revised agreement sat under a clean mug. Mrs. Pike signed as owner. Rocco signed the withdrawal of acquisition pressure and the repair guarantee for the damage Sable had caused. Tessa did not sign gratitude. She signed operational acknowledgement, which made her happy and the attorney very tired. There, she said. The diner remains a diner. Miguel rang the kitchen bell. Constitutional pancakes! Absolutely not, Tessa said, but she was smiling. Rocco saw it. The smile changed her whole face, not by making her softer, but by showing how much warmth she spent here without asking anyone to notice. He wanted, suddenly and inconveniently, to be someone who added to it instead of consuming it. At 7, he should have left. Sable's complaints were contained. The lease was secured. Roseclock would open tomorrow with its counter, its back room, its morning people, and its rules intact. Still, he stayed until Tessa pointed at the door. Go home. May I ask when your shift ends? When the side work is done. What side work? She gave him a suspicious look. Why? So I do not accidentally assume the story ends when the papers are signed. The answer disarmed her for exactly 1 second. Then she handed him a laminated checklist. Condiment bottles, napkin holders, sweep under table 7 since you're emotionally attached to it. White rags are under the sink. Do not touch the blue ones. Why? Bathrooms. White bin, he said immediately. For 45 minutes, Rocco Santoro did side work. He overfilled ketchup bottles, stacked napkin holders backward, and swept like a man negotiating with dust. Tessa corrected him with the brisk mercy of someone who believed competence was a form of respect. He took every correction. Not because he had become harmless, but because he was beginning to understand that this was not a room where power disappeared. It was a room where power had to become useful without making itself the center. At 8:03, the diner closed. Tessa locked the door and leaned her forehead against the glass for half a breath. Rocco looked away until she straightened. You did not have to stay, she said. No. Why did you? He looked at table 7. The dirty white rag from the morning had been rinsed, washed, and hung on the side rack to dry. It was still stained faintly brown at one corner, proof that not everything came out completely, even when cleaned correctly. Because I have spent most of my life paying other people to stand where I should have stood, he said. Tessa's face went still. That is a large sentence for a diner. It appears diners hold more than I expected. Careful. Slow down? Yes. He nodded. I can. She studied him, measuring whether the promise was decorative. If you come back, no clearing tables, no bodyguards hovering over Aaron, no buying the building to impress me or yourself, no private supper club, you order like a normal person. What does a normal person order? They read the menu. They do not ask for someone else's ruined breakfast because guilt tastes poetic. His mouth nearly smiled. Noted. She took a paper bag from behind the counter and set it in front of him. Pie, smashed coconut cream, still edible, ugly slice, half price. You are selling me damaged pie. You understand damaged things now. He paid $4 and put the extra in the tip jar only after she pointed at it. Good night, Rocco. His name in her voice made him hesitate. Good night, Tessa. The next morning, Roseclock opened at 5:30. At 6, Mrs. Pike inspected the corner booth heat like a general. At 6:10, Dean arrived with a dry sleeve and a grin. At 6:30, Aaron found a sealed envelope containing payment for a new uniform shirt and a note that said only, for the sleeve. No debt. Tessa knew who sent it. She allowed it because it did not ask for gratitude and because Aaron's smile nearly broke her. At 7:15, a black SUV stopped outside. Properly. Not in the bus stop. Rocco entered alone. He did not look less dangerous. If anything, he looked more sharply himself without men clearing space ahead of him. He paused by the takeout stand and waited until Tessa looked over. Counter or booth? She asked. Table 7, if available. It is. May I sit? The regulars made a sound they pretended was silverware. Tessa checked the table. Clean, ready, no mess left for the next person. You may. He sat. Aaron brought coffee without shaking. Miguel shouted, no fog, from the kitchen. Mrs. Pike raised her mug in solemn judgment. Rocco read the menu, actually read it. When Tessa came over, order pad ready, he looked up. 2 eggs over medium, rye toast, potatoes, coffee. Guilt breakfast again? Repair breakfast. That is not on the menu. Then I will have the special. She wrote it down. His eyes moved to the side rack where the dirty white rag hung, clean now, but still faintly stained. You kept it. It's a rag. We keep rags. That one? She looked at it too. That one teaches faster than the employee handbook. What does it teach? Tessa tapped her pen against the order pad. If you make the mess, you hold the rag. He repeated it quietly, not for performance. If you make the mess, you hold the rag. At the counter, Dean said amen. The diner laughed. Rocco looked around the room, not as an owner, not as a buyer, not as a man searching for the nearest exit from ordinary accountability. As a customer. It suited him badly enough to be promising. 1 month later, the dirty white rag hung in a small frame behind the counter. Tessa had opposed the frame. Miguel had built it anyway from scrap wood and labeled nothing because labels were tacky and also because everyone already knew. Aaron cleaned the glass every morning. Mrs. Pike saluted it with toast. Dean told new sanitation workers the story with increasing embellishment until Tessa threatened to charge him for dramatic licensing. Rocco came in twice a week, sometimes for breakfast, sometimes for coffee. Sometimes because Sable had tried another paper trick and discovered that Roseclock now had a waitress, a landlord aunt, a legal team, a sanitation worker, a grill cook, and one extremely controlled mafia boss who all understood the same rule. If you make the mess, you hold the rag. The rule spread. His men stopped dropping problems at other people's feet. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough that when one of them spilled coffee at Roseclock, he stood, asked for a rag, and cleaned it before Tessa could raise an eyebrow. Progress, she thought. Messy, ordinary progress. On a rain-bright Friday, Rocco arrived during the breakfast rush and waited by the host stand that was still mostly for takeout bags. Tessa carried 3 plates past him. Counter's full. I can wait. Table 7 and 10. I can wait. She glanced at him. He was holding a folded newspaper, his gloves in one hand, his black coat damp at the shoulders. Outside, his SUV was parked correctly. Inside, his bodyguard held the door for a woman with a walker and then stayed out of the aisle. Tessa felt the strange ache of seeing a rule become natural. When table 7 opened, Rocco did not sit until Aaron wiped it. Aaron finished, looked at him, and said, "Good to go." Rocco sat. Tessa came over with coffee. Usual? Yes. Repair breakfast? No. He looked at the framed rag. Reminder breakfast. She poured his coffee. You know, that sounds ridiculous. I have been told I need practice with humor. That wasn't humor. Then I need more practice. She smiled before she could stop herself. He saw. Of course he saw. But he did not claim the smile. He let it exist. That, more than anything, told her the lesson had taken root. At the end of the rush, he placed exact payment on the table, tip within pooled guidelines, and a note folded beneath the cup. Tessa opened it after he left. It was not a love letter. Not exactly. It was a lease addendum copy, city recorded, protecting Roseclock's morning service for 10 years. At the bottom, in Rocco's precise handwriting, were 8 words. The table stays clean. The diner stays yours. Tessa stood behind the counter with the paper in her hand and the dirty white rag in its frame behind her. She did not cry. She rang the service bell once. Miguel leaned out. "Order?" "No," she said. "Just making sure it still works." The bell's bright sound moved through Roseclock Diner, over the counter, past table 7, through the morning people who came because the coffee was hot and the room remembered them. Outside, Rocco paused beside his car and turned back as if he had heard it. Tessa lifted the paper. He touched 2 fingers to his chest, not a vow, not a performance, just acknowledgement. Then he pointed, very slightly, toward the framed rag. She laughed. The man had learned after all. That night, when he came for dinner, he brought no flowers. He brought pie from Roseclock, paid for it full price, with a 20% tip and a receipt tucked into the box like proof of civilization. Tessa inspected it. Acceptable. High praise. Do not get used to it. I would rather earn it repeatedly. She looked at him in the soft dark outside the diner, at the man who had once tried to buy his way around a mess and now carried receipts like offerings to the rules she had made him learn. "You are very strange," she said. "You threw a dirty rag at me. You needed it. I did." He said it so simply that the night changed. Tessa stepped closer. "If I go to dinner with you, Rocco Santoro, I am still not yours to fix. No. Not yours to buy. No. Not yours to hide behind. No. Then what am I?" He looked through the diner window at table 7, at the framed rag, at the room where he had first been made to clean what he caused. "The woman who taught me where repair starts," he said. Tessa's throat tightened. That was almost too good. Almost? You still owe me dinner. His smile came slow. "Then I will start there." She locked the diner door, checked it twice, and walked beside him to the car waiting legally at the curb. He opened the door. She stopped. "Rocco." "Yes? If your driver splashes the bus stop, I go home." He looked at the driver. The driver straightened with the terror of a man who understood romance now depended on curb etiquette. "He will not," Rocco said. "Good." Tessa got in. The car pulled away cleanly, leaving the curb dry, the diner lit behind them, and the dirty white rag hanging in its little frame over the counter. Not pretty, not symbolic in a way that needed explanation, just a cheap rag that had once landed beside a Mafia Boss's hand and changed the order of the room. In Roseclock Diner, that was enough.